Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the fourth live roundtable of the LenSAPOL project, the European Research Project. I am Gloria De Paoli, and I'm hosting today on behalf of the LenSAPOL project partner, Acteon. Today's live roundtable discussion focuses on the Nitrates and Pesticides Directive and on how LenSAPOL tools can support their implementation at the member state level. We will do so by taking Austria as a case study. But of course, all member states, to different extents, are facing issues with nitrates and pesticide pollution, and even more so, are required to implement the two directives. Our speakers will, of course, tell us more, so I would like to introduce them now. We have today Harald Loishandl-Weisz, a groundwater expert at the Austrian Environment Agency, who is dealing with monitoring, and Angelo Basile, a soil hydrology expert, and Marialaura Bancheri, hydrological modelist, both from the Italian National Research Council. Thank you all very much for joining us today. Just a note to our audience, if you have any questions, you can put them into the chat box next to the live stream, specifying who the question is for, and we will come to them at the end of the session if we have time, of course. So let's jump into this talk. Both the Nitrates and Pesticides Directive are addressing agricultural pollution and, in particular, the percolation of agricultural pollutants to groundwater resources. Angelo, can you give us an overview of these two directives and also the policy framework where they are inserted in?
Yes, good morning to everyone. Thank you, Gloria. Yes, I will try to introduce this session. So the implementation of the Pesticide Directive is mainly in charge of member states that has to deliver national action plans. And while for the Nitrate Directive are more involved local authorities like the region, and they also have to implement some local action plan, but also some vulnerable zone maps. So these two directives are rather old because date from 2009, the first one, the Pesticide Directive, and the 90, the Nitrate Directive. And they need generally a periodic checking and revisioning. But in this specific time, let me say that probably they required a very deep revisioning. This because now we have the European Green Deal. The new European Green Deal is based on two pillars. The first one is the new biodiversity strategy, but we will skip, we didn't talk about this. But the second one is the most important for us, is the Farm to Fork strategy. The Farm to Fork strategy sets concrete targets. This is most important. And among many others, is included the reduction to the 50% of the use of a pesticide, the risk of a pesticide, the reduction to 20% of the use of a fertilizer, and the reduction of 50% of the nutrient losses towards the groundwaters, including also, for example, increases to 25% of organic farming. So it's a plenty of really concrete targets that can be summarized in what the new Green Deal statement, in the new Green Deal statement, that is a zero pollution ambition. Probably this is too ambitious, this target, but we have to go toward this direction. Why there was a change in the policy of the EU. This change was due because common agricultural policies and related directive like the pesticide and nitrates more or less failed in their objective, because the general objective was to sustain the agriculture and the income of the farmer, maintain a healthy water, soil, health landscape. But probably this balance was weighed too much towards the income of the farmer. So they changed the paradigm, and the paradigm was zero pollution ambition. So in a concrete way, for our discussion and for our target, which are the instrument that the EU suggests to put in place to get this goal. Apart from some other very important but are not relevant for our discussion, like the use of biopesticide, the new formulate for fertilization, the integrated pest management procedure, and so on. What they ask, especially for the pesticide, is to reinforce the environmental risk assessment, because many of the indicators for now are related to the market, so are market-based. So we know just how many pesticides were sold, but we don't know the fate of this pesticide through our environment, through the soil, but also zone and groundwater. So they ask more risk assessment on this. They will develop new indicator. They ask also in some document to have this new indicator science-based. So what we are trying to do, and also the use of the modeling, because they are aware that it's not possible to monitoring everywhere everything. So this is the new general idea of the new Green Deal and the farm strategy, where the implementation of pesticide directives and nitrates directive apply. I stopped here, Gloria.
Thank you, Angelo. And so let's start with the pesticide directive. Harald, based on your experience at the Austrian Environment Agency, what are the challenges faced in implementing the directive? And more in general, what has been done in Austria for implementing the directive?
Thank you, Gloria. The national regulations set it in Austria concerning plant protection products deal with temporal restrictions, for example, the time periods when it can be applied, the times, how often, the spatial and local restrictions, and all this is standardized in these national documents. This includes also, for example, a certain distance to open waters, and beside the application in the field. It is also addressed to avoid potential point pollution by misuse, for example, that begins at the storage of the pesticides, and also when farmers handle with the substances and washing their equipment and so on. So all these steps have to be addressed in these regulations, but of course, throughout its widespread, diffuse occurrence, it is not always easy to control, especially on the field. But based on the monitoring results, for example, it is also possible to partly ban already authorized plant protection products in certain areas. For example, that is the case in Austria in some drinking water protection areas in Upper Austria, for example, for the substances methoxychlor and terbutylazine. So you always have to find the balance between providing the farmers with enough pesticides to for their challenges and for plant diseases, but and between the environmental pollution. What we see in Austria is that some groundwater bodies are still polluted with, let's call it old pesticides. So these are substances which are not authorized anymore and lasting very long in the groundwater bodies. But the focus nowadays and the challenge for us is to find the new substances and especially their metabolites, because in general the most exceedances of still authorized pesticides are not the parent substances themselves, but the metabolites of these products. And also with the improving knowledge about the pesticides in the environment, but also the improved analytical skills in the laboratory, we find more and more substances which we have to deal with and what we have to decide if this, for example, is a relevant pesticide metabolite or not. So, for example, in Austria, we have also screening methods for pesticides, and with this method, we can detect more than 600 different parameters for pesticides. And as we have the aim to provide drinking water in all groundwater bodies, we follow the precautionary principle. So therefore, we declare all metabolites at the first stage as relevant until they get approved or not approved. If they're ecotoxical and human toxicity is not given like as the parent pesticide, it can be declared as non-relevant, and then the threshold for pesticides is not applied anymore. But until that, we have to deal everything, every pesticide, every compound we found as a pesticide, and also with this threshold value in groundwater and also in drinking water. So this is one of our main challenges. And also what we see in the monitoring is, we also see this at the monitoring sites, which exceeding the threshold value in the area of Machfeld. In this case, it's most of the time it's the metachlor metabolite and also one case metamitron. But these exceedances mostly occur especially in combination with permeable soils and also high groundwater table. So as the pollution in the groundwater lasts for many years, sometimes even decades, when we look in some areas of Machfeld also, therefore the prevention is very important. And also there, I think this is what the tool can help us.
Thank you. And so here comes the land support tool on pesticides. Why is it needed? And which are the main novelties brought up on the planning scene by the tool? Marialaura, can you tell us more about this?
Yes, thank you, Gloria. I share my video. Okay, just let me know if you are able to see my presentation again. Yes, okay. So I prepared just a few slides to let the audience to enter in the rationale between this tool that we call the pesticide fate tool. Now it addresses and strengthens the pesticide and also the nitrate directives in Europe. So first of all, why? The pesticide fate tool is a new web-based, freely available, dynamical, both in space and time tool for the assessment of the groundwater vulnerability. It is applied for 3 different European countries, which are Italy, Austria, and Hungary. Okay. It was integrated within the spatial decision support system that is going to be developed under the project Land Support, and the tool represents a good trade-off between the research scientific world and the everyday real-life applications. In fact, it has an innovative physical background, which is not computationally demanding, as required by the on-the-fly modeling and what-if scenarios, which are commonly done thanks to the Land Support platform. Unlike the other commonly used model based on numerical solutions, such as the model based on Richards combined with the advective dispersion equation. So we try to find a new approach that could deal with all the requests of on-the-fly modeling and what-if scenarios required by the end users of the platform. Moreover, the high flexibility of the spatial DSS infrastructure allows the pesticide phase tool to compute multiple scenario analysis, for example, considering the climate change and also the land use change, so different crops and also different type of pesticides. The tool is based on this model, which is called the extended transfer function model, which was expanded to consider the transport of reactive solutes, such as the pesticides. So the model is able to simulate the spatiotemporal distribution of the non-point source pollutants, so pollutants that are spread and along the unsaturated zone. So for example, here we are seeing a soil, a layered soil with different characteristics at different spatial scales. So basically we are computing what we call the travel time, which is the time that our reactive solute, our pesticide, or also a generic tracer takes to travel literally from the upper surface of our domain till the groundwater table depth. In the case of the reactive transport, we are considering also the retardation and the chemical decay that are characteristics of the solute of the pesticides that we are considering. Going on the platform, we are in the area of the macro tools of the land degradation. So when the end user accesses the platform, has to click on the land degradation tools. In the meantime, what we did with the tool was trying to, according to the local suggestions of farmers and users, to define the most commonly used crops. If the end user change the area of interest, the scale, so moving from Markfeld to the Valle Teresina in Italy to Zala County, you will find different crop and different pesticides. So here we are. When you choose the tool, which is here in the groundwater vulnerability, or is this big red arrow pesticide phase tool, you obtain this interface where you have to choose your region of interest that you previously drawn. You can choose a start date and end date. What is important is that the tool works at yearly time scale. So here you just choose the year of the start of the beginning of the simulation and the end of simulation. And then, as I was saying, according to your selection, to your scale, you will find a selection of land uses and pesticides. So, for example, in this case, I was evaluating for my region of interest the use of maize and the mesotrione as a pesticide. If you go ahead, please, Gloria. Okay, then you will get the results. So the results are presented in different ways. So you have a shape file, so a map colored according to the percentage of the arrival of these pesticides at the groundwater table depth, with the colors that varies between green when nothing is arriving to red when almost the 100% is arriving. And then you have also these results organized in a table that the end user can visualize and manage with all the information about the run that was done, and also in some graphics that you can open clicking on the action button, which gives you also the time variability of the arrival of the pesticides at the groundwater table depth. Okay, if you go ahead, we are working continuously on this tool, trying to fixing bugs first of all, and trying to improve the modeling day by day. So the next steps are dealing with metabolites, as Harald was saying. So the tool is going to consider the modeling of the metabolites generated by the parent pesticides for the 3 case studies that we already implemented. Then the model is going to be coupled with the crop growth model, which is called Armosa, in order also to simulate the nitrate transport, so with the same approach. And in these days, we are also defining the risk classes of vulnerability, which are specifically defined according to the stakeholder suggestions. So for each of the 3 case studies that we considered. Thank you for your attention. That's the finish of my presentation.
Thank you very much, Marialaura. And Harald, which practical applications can the tool have in Austria?
Yeah, I think the highest benefit will be a raise in the farmers' awareness of the vulnerability of the fields, and especially also of different parts of the fields. And based on this visualization provided with the tool, the farmers can decide, for example, to choose a different crop type or even different management practices, such like with a reduced pesticide application, or in best case without pesticide application on these fields with higher vulnerability. So when we think about the models used for approval and authorization of pesticides, usually this is the case for several types of soil, but not always in these high permeable regions. And so this is very important to differentiate between areas on the field or different fields with normal or proper soil conditions due to the vulnerable areas. And therefore, I see a high potential of this tool. And also, if it will be possible in the future to classify and to model metabolites, this would be also a great help for farmers, of course.
Thank you. As we have no questions so far, let's look now at the Nitrates Directive. So again, Harald, what are the shortcomings of this directive, according to you? And again, what are the implementation challenges that most commonly faced in Austria? And if you can give us some practical examples.
The Nitrates Directive is mainly implemented, for example, with a nitrate action program in Austria, and the nitrate I want to link to the tool in another point. For example, the Nitrates Directive also includes nitrate vulnerable zones. So these are zones of high vulnerability in order to protect drinking water resources. And in Austria, we did not designate it only nitrate vulnerable zones, but we apply all these measures on the whole territory. So this means we want to have the same standards all over Austria, like every and therefore we that the farmers have to the same restrictions in the whole country. For example, we have the drinking for the groundwater threshold value of 45 milligrams per liter for nitrate, so that we can provide the drinking water quality in every groundwater body. So therefore, this is one of our first two challenges, and we need a lot of restrictions in the agricultural practice. So this, therefore, a code of good agricultural practice is laid down in the Nitrate Action Program, and this is the mandatory for all farmers in Austria. And in addition to this obligatory measures of the action program, there's also a voluntary program, which is an agri-environmental program under the common agricultural policies. And these measures in these regulations address, for example, fertilizer limits on the fields, the period of manure application, also trainings for farmers, and especially for areas with higher groundwater risk, there is also foreseen to provide plausibility checks by the yield, so that they don't plant too much fertilizer if the yield is not the same amount like they calculate the fertilizer on. So this all should aim to a reduced nitrogen surplus, which is at least the main goal in these regulations, and also the aim of the upcoming period. We have now a draft of the next plan period, and that this is the focus to reduce these surpluses. So therefore, also in the vulnerable areas, the farmers have to calculate nitrogen balances on the field, for the fields. And in these areas, also the fertilizer limits are a little bit more reduced than the other areas in Austria. So, so at least what we know, for example, when we go to the Machfeld area, there is less livestock there, so we have less manure. That means the mineral fertilizer can be calculated and applied just to the needs of the plant, of the crops themselves. So at least there is not so much surplus, as we also calculated in our risk assessments for the river basin management plan. For example, we calculate regional nitrogen balances for each groundwater body, and based on these calculations, we see that these parts like Machfeld in the eastern area of Austria are not the areas with the highest surplus, nitrogen surplus, but due to the less precipitation in this area and therefore a low groundwater recharge, we see that even in some cases a few kilograms of nitrogen surplus can end up in an exceedance of the groundwater threshold value for nitrate. So this means for us the challenge, especially in these areas where it's also due to this low groundwater recharge, it's very long lasting and hard to get rid of contamination once it is given. So the main challenge is to optimize not only for the yield, but optimize the balance between the crop yield and the environmental and to avoid environmental pollution. And therefore, it is very important to know your local conditions. So your local conditions, as we have said before, like for the pesticides, the groundwater table, the hydrology, and the permeability of your soil. Thank you.
Thank you. And the Land Support Project is also setting up a tool on nitrates, of course. So, Angelo, can you tell us more about how it works and how it supports the implementation of the Nitrates Directive?
Yes, thank you, Gloria. Yes, I would like to recall what I said before about the concrete targets of the farm to fork strategy. So the reduction of 20% of the use of fertilizer and the reduction of nutrient losses by 50%. So if this type of target is very complex to manage, because it seems simple, but it's very complex, because as Harald said, you cannot reduce just the input of nutrients and the reduction of losses without taking account the yield production, so the income of the farmer. That is a specific goal. But a part of the economical, social and administrative issues that are relevant. Also, if we think to the agronomical part, this issue has many interactions, because depend on the type of crop. For example, also if it's a summer crop or winter crop, depend of course of the choice of the farmer. So the type of tillage, the type of irrigation, the amount of irrigation, the rotation, the insertion of some intercrops in the rotation, of course, the type of fertilization, organic, mineral, mixed, and so on. So all this complexity, in theory, should be managed to have a specific answer for a specific environment. Of course, as Harald said, Austria is probably because it's a rather small country, rather homogeneous, a flat action can be a solution. But in many other European countries, like in Italy, that is bigger, there are many different in environment between the different regions. There are different pressure. For example, there are regions where the pressure of the livestock is very high, in others is reduced. So there are also many different, for example, in Italy, by a social point of view. So the south respect to the north of Italy, there are important differences. So for our point of view, now we have to try to manage this difference. So a flat answer, a flat action is not the best one. Also, if we understood the choice of the Austrian partner. But now already we have to go to manage each specific case. Now, with the land support, we are going in this direction. Not all the problems are solved, but we can do this. As Marialaura said before, the key point is the what-if modeling. So this is our solution. So the idea is do not produce by ourselves some maps of vulnerability. We can do, of course, but is the public authorities, is the farmer itself that produce some output according to their own needs. For example, if you think the input interface that Marialaura showed, for the Nitrates Directive, there is a model simulating the crop growth. So all the variables can be managed by the public authorities. For example, after drawing an area, in that area, he can ask to the model, to the system, what happens if I put a crop, an intercrop in my classical rotation? What happens if I change the crop? What happens if the climate change? So instead that use the actual climate, I use a climate change scenario, the tillage, and so on. So he will produce some results that will not only the results of the nitrate leached below the root zone and through the TFM model transferred to the groundwater, but also the yield, the production. Because as I said before, and also Harald stressed, we cannot reduce the input without taking account the income of the farmer. We cannot produce, suggest an action, a practice that halves the yield. It's a nonsense. It doesn't make sense to suggest something like that. So the idea is to manage the complexity and to give to the user the highest flexibility we can. This is what we the idea below all the land support project, but specific the pesticide phase tool and the nitrate tool. So this, for now, we have a prototype that we are just checking, but is almost ready. But I hope that before the summer break, we will have you will figure out the final version of the tool on on the system and yes, to start to try to manage this type of a tool. Stop. I finished.
And indeed, we are looking forward to seeing the tool. My last question is for Harald, and again, is on which practical applications can the tool have in Austria?
I think the same like for the pesticides, this information could be an incentive for the farmers to reduce the nitrogen application on these areas of high risk for groundwater pollution, or to apply for special measures within the agricultural program under the common agricultural policy. Protecting groundwater or also enhancing biodiversity. Therefore, they also would get compensation payments, so they can better focus on these areas of higher risk and to set in these measures. Or there should also be a motivation to set these measures if they didn't do it until now. So as a result, I hope that the nitrogen surplus of the hydrosphere should be limited and minimized with the help of these tools.
Thank you. Our speakers are lucky today because there are no questions from our audience. So I'd like to close the session by taking a final tour de table, giving each of our speakers a chance to very quickly give us a concluding statement. So shall we start with Marialaura?
Yes, so according to me, the importance of this kind of approach, so based on the spatial decision support system, should be the future of this to address correctly these problems. So my expectation is that we are going to use more and more these tools since we have the opportunity thanks to this platform, and also to our increasing awareness about the problems of these problems. And thank you for the attention.
Thank you, Marialaura. Angelo?
Oh, thank you, Gloria. Very quickly, I would just recap 2 sentences that I already said. So, zero pollution ambition is not my sentence, but it's from EU Commission. And related, we believe in the what-if modeling in this such decision support system. So these are the 2 key sentences that I hope the audience will be take at home. Thank you for attention to everybody.
And Harald?
Thank you, Gloria. My hope is that the raise of awareness of the vulnerability of our natural resources will lead to a future when, for example, maybe pesticides will be applied not prophylactically, but maybe used on a prescription, like pharmaceuticals, for example. That would be something I would wish. And for nitrogen, I think nitrogen as a nutrient, we brought too much, we focused too much on optimized yields, as we said before. But the nitrogen surpluses and especially the losses in the nature over the last decades have very negative effects on water, soil, air, also human health and biodiversity and also climate. And therefore we need a better balance between the benefits in agriculture and conservation of our nature. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Harald, and thank you very much to all of our speakers. And thanks to our audience for staying with us up to the end. Just a quick reminder, if you like our roundtable, the next and last episode will be next Thursday, and it will be on forestry modeling. So I wish you a very good day, and I hope to see you again next week.